What's going on, guys? Today I'm going to be showing you a brand new boot hack to help break in your brand new soccer cleats called the mummification trick. Let's see how it's done. What you're going to need for this boot hack is, of course, your brand new boots as well as some kind of paper. I'm going to be using toilet paper. So what you're going to want to do is very carefully wrap them in the toilet paper until they're completely covered up. Perfect. Next, you're going to need a coffin. The box will do just fine. Next, you're going to need a tomb for the mummification process. I built mine out of cardboard. Simply place it inside and then wait a couple thousand years and you should be good to go. What's going on, guys? Josh from soccerreviewsforyou.com, bringing you the top 5 boot hacks that will destroy your cleats. Now, the internet is full of all kinds of different information. Some of it is extremely useful and some of it is purely misinformation. And I get messages on a daily basis about all kinds of different boot hacks that are floating around on the internet that straight up are just not good for your cleats for reasons that I will explain in today's video using very simple logic. So if you're interested in learning what boot hacks to avoid, you've come to the right place. Also, if you guys end up enjoying the video, don't forget to support it with a like. And if you're new here, be sure to hit that subscribe button along with the little bell notification so you don't miss out on future videos. New videos go up every single day. Dumb boot hack number 1 is removing the laces on cleats that aren't laceless. Here's why you should never do this. Now, the logic behind this whole boot hack is mainly due to the sock phenomenon that has started with soccer cleats in general. So many of them feature knitted uppers, and a lot of them are featuring one-piece designs now for the construction of the upper. I have here as an example a Superfly 6, which is all new, and as you can see, with the laces removed, it's still a one-piece construction. If I were to put these on my feet, they technically would not fly off. However, would they be stable? Would they perform as well? Would they actually be safe to play in? The simple answer to that question is no, and here's why. Now, essentially what laces do on any form of footwear, not just soccer cleats, is they hold everything together. And on a soccer cleat specifically, it's extremely important to have proper stability, proper lockdown. That's not only going to make for a better performing product, it's also going to make for better comfort. And I think most importantly, the safest possible experience from the shoes. So you'll notice on this particular shoe, as well as a lot of other shoes with a one-piece upper, the central portion where the laces are positioned is actually elasticated. And the reasoning for that is so you can actually put the shoes on and take them off a little bit more easily, because the sides of the upper as well as the forefoot toe box area obviously is not a stretchy elasticated material. Now, what the laces are doing here is they are essentially securing that central portion of the upper once the shoes are actually on your feet. Once you've tied the laces, not necessarily super tight, because you don't have to tie them super tight, it's still preventing that middle part of the shoe from expanding a lot, because you don't want it to expand a lot. It can expand a little, but you never want it to expand a lot, because if it's stretching a lot while you're playing, you're losing stability, your foot's sliding around on the inside of the shoe, your heel isn't going to be secure, that can lead to blisters and excessive rubbing, and it's going to be highly unstable as well, which can result in a pretty serious injury, simply because you are misusing the product. These shoes were designed to have laces. Any shoe that comes with laces out of the box is designed to have laces. If you remove them, you are essentially making the product worse, and again, putting yourself at a much higher risk of injury. Now, one of the arguments that a lot of people like to make in regards to removing the laces on their laceless shoes, the way that they're able to justify it, is they like the way that the shoe is able to expand because the laces aren't there. And to those people, my counter argument would be that there's just not a lot of logic to what you're doing. You can still have that same expansion with the laces in place. The performance is going to be better, the lockdown is going to be better, and the shoes are going to be a whole heck of a lot safer to wear as well. When you're putting them on in the first place, the laces should be fully loosened up. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people try to put on shoes where the laces are still tied tight and they're jamming their foot in there and having a really, really hard time. Loosen the laces properly, they'll go on really easy, and they'll expand as if the laces weren't there at all. And then once they're actually on your feet, it's a big misconception that you have to tie the laces as tight as they can possibly go. That's uncomfortable for a lot of people. You shouldn't do that unless that's the way you like them to feel. What I would recommend, if you don't like a super tight fit across the top of your foot or wherever the laces are positioned, is just snug them up enough to where they're hugging the top of the upper. They're not left completely loose, because you don't want hanging laces off the top of your foot. That would be kind of unsafe as well. As long as the knot is tied at the top, even having the laces just snug across the top of the foot is going to go a long way in regards to stability, lockdown, and the overall performance characteristics of the shoe. Not to mention, it's not going to be highly unstable, which is what you'll have if you're not wearing any laces at all. Moral of the story is that if you really want laceless boots, actually buy laceless boots. Dumb boot hack number 2 is the hot water trick. Here's why. Now, when it comes to the hot water trick, I feel like a lot of people do it, not even realizing why they're doing it. The reason why you'd put your shoes in hot water in the first place is because of the hot part. The heat from the water heats up all the materials of the shoes, and when the materials are heated up, they tend to be a lot softer, therefore they're going to break in more quickly, right? Well, not necessarily. Now take this from somebody that has broken in probably 500-600 pairs of soccer cleats, maybe even more than that. You wanna know how many times I've used the hot water trick to break in a new pair of boots? One time. That one shoe was the Nike Mercurial Superfly 2, a shoe that features an extremely rigid, very plasticky stiff upper that's reinforced by flywire cables throughout the entirety of the shoe that makes them that much stiffer. I use the hot water trick to help break them in, keyword being help. Now, helping the break-in process sounds like a good thing, so why wouldn't I want to use the hot water trick? Well, there are two main reasons. The first reason being that most soccer cleats just don't need it anymore. Synthetics have come such a long way where they're almost fully broken in out of the box. Really what I think you're breaking in when it comes to modern day soccer cleats is more so just getting used to the way that the shoes fit and feel on feet. Most synthetics aren't going to stretch that much, and they're not really going to soften up or change that much from the way that they feel out of the box. So breaking them in naturally is going to be the most effective way, in my opinion. The second reason why you don't want to use hot water is because you're now exposing your shoes not only to excessive amounts of heat, but also excessive amounts of water, which sounds strange because you're going to play in most of your cleats in wet weather. Water's not going to hurt them, but why could submerging them in hot water be bad? Well, here's why. Now here's the thing about the construction of soccer cleats. They're not as good as we'd like them to be. They're mass produced after all, so there's always going to be minor imperfections. And when you're talking about soccer cleats breaking, it's generally the sole separating from the upper. And often along the edge, you will find some kind of imperfection, even if you can't really see it. It might just be the smallest thing that is present on your brand new boots that you're about to dunk into hot water. Well, guess what? That hot water, it can seep into those cracks, and what's holding the upper and the sole plate together? It's glue, and if you're excessively heating up that glue, even if it's just a little bit at the edge, that could be enough to potentially have the upper tear from the sole plate prematurely. And guess what? You've now taken your shoes that, yes, you broke in more quickly, but they're not going to last as long for that reason. Now, I'm not saying that this is 100% guaranteed to happen every time you use the hot water trick. You can do the hot water trick and potentially not have any issues at all, but it could be part of the reason why your shoes don't last as long as they potentially could if you avoided hot water altogether. You really never want to expose your shoes to excessive amounts of heat, and you never really want to expose them to excessive amounts of water. You certainly don't want them sitting in a pool of water for extended periods of time. Also, so many synthetics these days are either knitted or mesh based, which is already a very soft material. The only part that's going to add any kind of stiffness is going to be the liner or the little plastic top layer that you'll find on pretty much all of these shoes, which softens up with minor amounts of heat that are going to come naturally from your feet after about 20 minutes of wear time. So basically with the hot water trick, you're simply avoiding that first 20 minutes of the shoes potentially feeling slightly uncomfortable. Is that really worth it to put the entire shoe at risk for potential worse durability? In my opinion, no. You don't gotta go to the store, buy new socks, and then dip the socks in hot water thinking that they're gonna be softer after the fact. So why would you do it with your knitted soccer cleats? Which brings us to dumb boot hack number 3, and that is filling your boots with water and putting them in the freezer to stretch. Now, we just talked about the hot water trick and why it does help to soften up the materials on your shoes. That is by way of heat. So how could another boot hack, which is essentially doing the exact opposite, have the same effect? Extremely cold versus extremely hot, they're both things that you want to avoid. Here's why. So we just talked about the hot water trick and why it does help to soften up materials, that is by way of heat. So how would the exact opposite temperature, extremely cold to the point where the material is going to freeze, also help to break in your shoes? Well, simple answer is it doesn't. And again, you're putting your shoes at risk of breaking prematurely just because you don't want to wear them in properly. So for those that don't know what this boot hack is, it's for stretching the upper of your shoe without actually having your feet inside the shoes. Therefore, you don't even know how much they're going to stretch. Does that sound like a good idea? No, let me move on. So basically what you would do for this, which again, I don't recommend doing it, is you'd take a plastic bag, generally a decent size one, you would fill it with water, and then you would kind of stuff that bag inside the shoe, where the idea is that the water and the bag is gonna fill up the entire volume on the inside. Then you would take the boots with the water-filled bag on the inside and throw them in the freezer for that water to freeze. And because the water, when it freezes, expands a little bit, in theory, it should stretch your boots. Will it actually do that? Well, I question how much expansion you're actually gonna get out of that water to actually lead to any kind of significant stretching. And the fact that all of these shoes are now made from plastic, probably not a good idea. Now here's the thing about stretching your shoes. When you buy brand new shoes, and a lot of people are ordering online these days, often when you get them, they might be a little bit too tight, they might be a little bit too small, and people think that they can just stretch them out and they'll be fine after that. And you can get away with certain old school leather models, the Copa Mundial comes to mind, where you can legitimately buy them very tight, borderline too small, and they will actually stretch quite a lot. When it comes to most modern soccer cleats, even the leather ones, none of them are really gonna stretch that significantly anymore, either in length or in width. If anything, shoes are gonna stretch more in width. Very rarely are they gonna stretch in length. And you have to think about, again, logically, how could they stretch in length when they're attached to a plastic base? That plastic base is never going to stretch. Now, when it comes to putting the shoes in the freezer to stretch them, you are now exposing all of these materials to excessive amounts of cold, because you're not just putting them in the freezer for 5 minutes, you're putting them in the freezer for a couple hours. That water actually has to freeze inside of the shoes. And that's not going to be great whether your shoes are synthetic or leather. If they're synthetic, there's likely some kind of a plastic element. In fact, there's always a plastic element in the form of the sole plate, but pretty much every synthetic shoe has some kind of plastic top layer to the shoe. And if you know anything about plastic, when it gets really, really cold, it also gets extremely brittle. So while they're unlikely to break while they're in the freezer, you've now basically stretched the upper out, potentially, depending on how successfully that ice freezes on the inside of the shoe. And while the material is at its weakest, you've tried to stretch it. So you've basically, again, while it might not look like you've done anything, you've potentially damaged the shoes long term to where they're now not going to last as long. And that's just not a good idea. When it comes to stretching a leather shoe this way, leather is skin. Have you ever put ice directly against your skin? It hurts. It hurts so much that it burns. And guess what leather is? It's the skin of an animal. You don't want to expose these types of natural materials to any excessive temperatures, whether it's excessively hot or excessively cold. It's just not good for the material. That's why putting your shoes in the freezer just isn't a good idea. It seems like simple logic, but people see this and seem to think that it's great. Also, if you're trying to make the shoes feel like they're molded to your feet, doesn't it make a lot more sense to actually have your feet inside the shoes so they're stretching to that exact shape, rather than filling them with water, freezing the water, and hoping that the ice expands to the exact shape of your foot, which, by the way, that is not going to happen. Yes, breaking them in this way and having them stretch naturally with the shoes on your feet might be slightly uncomfortable depending on how tight they are. It might take a couple training sessions. It might even take a couple of weeks, but you know that once that process is over, you're going to have the perfect fit. If you're leaving it literally up to Mother Nature and the inside of your freezer to stretch your shoes perfectly to the shape of your feet, you're more optimistic than I am. Dumb boot hack number 4 is cutting holes and cutting collars on your soccer cleats. Now this is one of those boot hacks that I think most people don't actually go forward and do, but if you were thinking about doing this, let me explain why it's probably not a great idea. When it comes to cutting collars, it's just generally not a good idea, again, for the sake of the boot's durability. You do see certain professional players do it, but they're pros, they're not paying for their boots, and if they destroy them after 1 or 2 uses, they can just go ahead and get a new pair, cut those, and continue doing that process over and over again. For those of us that are spending $300 on a pair of Superflies, then cutting the collar off, probably not something you want to continue doing every single week once the shoes have been destroyed. You have to consider that all of these collars, they're always made from some kind of knitted material. When you're talking about fly knit or prime knit, those are generally very densely knitted materials, elasticated as well. And once you cut it, there's really no way to stop it from fraying. Could you technically fold it over and sew it? Sure, I'm not sure how that would work out for you long term, but again, you are risking the shoes basically fraying and essentially just falling apart on you because you've decided to cut the collar that really isn't doing anything in the first place. It's there more so for the sake of looks, and you forget about actually wearing it at all. It doesn't feel like anything after about 20 minutes once you get used to it. So to cut it off completely, just don't buy a mid-cut shoe if it bothers you that much. Now, when it comes to cutting holes in the upper, I have an example pair right here. Unfortunately, these were destroyed in a parking lot accident. You can see the studs are gone. But this has a hole in the heel as well as a hole in the toe. The hole in the heel thing has kind of been made famous by Coutinho, who potentially has blisters on his heel, potentially has Haglund's deformity. We don't really know exactly what the problem is. And we've also seen certain players cutting holes in the toe for the sake of a bruised toenail. Now, here's the thing about cutting a hole in any part of the upper. The reasoning for it would be to relieve pressure. And if you cut a hole, there can't be any pressure because there's nothing pressing against that area of your foot. So cutting the holes does actually work. Unlike most of the boot hacks in this video, it is an effective solution if you're dealing with pain caused by your footwear or caused by pressure. However, when you cut a hole in the upper, when you cut the collar off, you're voiding the manufacturer's warranty. And that's why I really wouldn't recommend doing it, other than just destroying your shoes, because once your blister heals, you probably still don't want a hole there. But a lot of people don't realize that when you buy a shoe from any major manufacturer, whether it's soccer cleats or any other form of footwear, should something break prematurely, like a sole separation situation with a pair of soccer cleats, generally they'll replace them for you for free. But if you've modified the product by cutting a hole or cutting off the collar, that manufacturer's warranty is voided, and you don't have that as an option anymore. You're just left with a pair of shoes that are broken with some holes. And finally, boot hack number 5 is putting your cleats in the washing machine. Now, the reason why this is dumb is kind of the same reason why the hot water trick isn't the greatest idea. You're exposing the shoes to excessive amounts of water. And I'm assuming if you're putting your shoes in the washing machine, you're doing it on a regular basis. If your shoes stink, there are products that you can use. You can even put a tea bag inside, and that's gonna absorb a lot of the smell and certainly help the odor situation if that's the reason why you're doing it. But if you're just simply worried about cleaning the shoes, again, you're exposing them to excessive amounts of water. They're going to be fully submerged for an extended period of time. And just as an example, this is basically what's happening in the washing machine. Imagine this as a washing machine. Here are your shoes. Would you ever clean your shoes like this? Now, I do realize you can put the shoes inside of a mesh bag that would help them from clanking around, but they're still gonna be submerged in water for an extended period of time, which, like we talked about with the hot water trick, is not a great idea. And also, if you don't think about the temperature inside the washing machine, yes, you can set it to cool, but you can also set it to hot, perhaps on accident, and you're essentially doing the hot water trick for like 25 minutes inside of the washing machine. Not a great idea. So my recommendation would be to clean your shoes by hand. The washing machine thing, it's kind of a really, really lazy way of trying to clean your shoes. If you're that worried about keeping them clean, use some water, use a toothbrush, and clean them that way. If the smell is an issue, there are products you can buy to help with the smell. Even put a tea bag inside, that'll help to absorb a lot of the smell as well. But using the washing machine to clean any kind of footwear, I just don't think it's a great idea at all. Anyways, guys, those are 5 boot hacks that are not actually boot hacks. They're stuff that you should avoid doing and could potentially destroy your shoes should you choose to do them for reasons that I explained in the video. If you enjoyed, be sure to support it with a like. If you have any questions, leave them down below in the comments and I'll do my best to get an answer out to you. And if you know anybody doing any of these boot hacks that you would like to help out, please share this video with them because I'm sure they'll find it very, very helpful and hopefully informative, because this is real information, not just boot hacks for the sake of boot hacks that don't actually do anything. Anyways, if you aren't subscribed already, be sure to hit that subscribe button for daily videos on all the latest and greatest soccer gear. You can find all my social media information linked down below in the description as well. And other than that, guys, hope you enjoyed the video. As always, thanks for watching.